This is the Secret Life of Mold podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 10th episode of the Secret Life of Mold. Our topic today is why laboratory sampling is an important part of a mold investigation. Today, I'm privileged to have on the show Mr. Brandon Apple, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Mold Inspection Sciences, and Mike Marshall, the COO of Mold Inspection Sciences, Texas. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, Craig. Good to be here.
Yeah.
I'm probably more excited to have Brandon here than anybody. Me and Brandon talk all the time, so I was like, you're going to be on the podcast. That's awesome.
I've been super stoked, man. Ever since I heard about it, I'm glad to be here, glad to be a part of it, and join the club for sure. Definitely. Cool.
Well, I'm super excited too. You know, Mike's been on the show before and has done also an episode on asbestos as well, which is a great show. And so Brandon, very excited to have you. You're going to be a really important part of this podcast today, because we've got a lot of really great information for our viewers, and a really important topic that really hits home with all of us, because this is what we do and we specialize in. So
Absolutely.
Why don't we just jump right in? Let's just kind of talk about what we're going to discuss today. Today's episode will be the first in a 4-part series where we will discuss why mold sampling is an important part of the mold inspection process. Through the course of this series, we'll be discussing what type of samples are used when investigating a potential mold problem in a home or business, and why it's such an important part of that investigation. So let's just go ahead and jump in, guys. Let's talk about the common types of samples, how they're utilized through the course of our investigation, and how they help us confirm the extent of any issues that we find.
Yeah, for sure. And before we jump into that, can I just say, once this topic was introduced, I got really excited about it and started thinking about some just past projects we've done, and really wanted to kind of tell a story of when the samples have really helped us, just really determine the full extent of a problem, even you could say in a surprising manner, for sure, because sometimes, we're going to find things that were unexpected with those samples. So that takes me back to a couple of years ago, actually, in Southern California. We were contacted by the Dr. Phil show, believe it or not. And it's actually the second time they've reached out to us. So that was really cool. But they were dealing with an individual who really was, to the point where they felt like they were being poisoned to some degree in their house. And as we see in a lot of cases, when somebody's, in an environment, where, they might be being exposed to something, that can start to affect them in lots of different ways, even including to a neurological degree. So some of her claims were outright, just kind of out there. She thought maybe even potentially one of her neighbors was poisoning her. So really somebody in an environment just not knowing what's going on, if that kind of makes sense. So what we did is we came in, we did what we normally do, a thorough investigation of that property, started to put together our typical sampling strategy. And, we had found some issues, not overly glaring, but worth sampling, and, move forward with our normal protocol. And really through the course of that sampling, I would even say I was surprised at some of the issues we found in this house. So we had, very elevated airborne mold spore counts, Penicillium aspergillus up in the 10,000 spores per cubic meter range. Just very, very elevated conditions. Some of the marker spore types we look out for, such as Chaetomium and Stachybotrys, really just started to determine, going back to her initial concern, she thought she was being poisoned. And to some degree she was. It wasn't by her neighbor, obviously, but it was a very contaminated environment. So really just helped paint that picture for us,
Yeah, I remember that story, and going through that. Although you guys doing the inspection and the interview with Dr. Phil, we were on the side with you guys. But I remember that her daughter said something that's just like stood out to me and just like jogged my memory right there. She said that at one point her mom told her that she thought she was being poisoned by terrorists. You know what I mean? And that they were pumping something into her building, And it just, I don't know why it jogged my memory right there, but it just made me think like, all of these issues that people have from mold related, whether it's allergenic or like you said, neurogenic, there's just so person to person, like each person experiences that like so differently, and you just don't know like person to person, house to house, what we're going to run into. And it's kind of the challenge and the fun part of the industry. I know not dealing with it is not fun for our clients, but it's challenging and fun to me to kind of dig into all of that and figure out what's going on in these environments, and also tie it to, or help people tie it to, what's going on with them personally. And then, that's really rewarding when we get to that point. And this one was too. I know she ended up going through, I think it was like a couple-week detox or something with Dr. Phil, and got her back to not only a healthy living environment, but just a healthy life, And like that to me, like it's just so the most rewarding part of this industry is just that, helping someone get to that point. So just wanted to
for sure
give you guys that. Yeah.
Definitely. And that's what we're really all about. I mean, we're all in this to, help our clients understand if they have a mold problem and the severity of that problem. And really, that's a great example, Brandon, of how that sampling that was performed during that investigation really told the whole story. Because in walking through her unit, there wasn't really a lot of glaring, like you mentioned, it wasn't a lot of glaring, obvious mold problems. It wasn't like there was black mold growing all over all the walls and, something that was just obvious. But we dug deep and we did our investigation. But truly the sampling that we performed and the laboratory analysis of the air as well as surfaces gave us all the information that we needed to help that
absolutely
client really understand the severity of the problem and honestly to help her doctor treat it.
For sure. Definitely.
So a great example of why that sampling is really a critical part of the whole investigation and necessary.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
That's a really good segue to a common question that we get, and that is, what type of samples are used in the course of an investigation? Brandon, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, for sure. Really, there's a lot of different options when it comes to sampling, and a lot of different scenarios where we might recommend one over another. But really good to just set the stage and kind of do a quick summary through them. First and foremost, with the air sampling, like we just talked about on that project, air sampling, what are we doing? We're testing the air for the presence of microscopic mold spores. So that can be really beneficial. For example, for trying to determine if we have a likelihood for a hidden mold source, we're likely going to find very highly elevated conditions in those scenarios. Also, if we have just a known mold issue, we have apparent, growth in front of us, we want to know how much that might be affecting the environment. So that's going to help us determine, overall contamination of the space and things like that. So air sampling, super common, one of the bigger tools we use. Also, next would be surface sampling. And I'll use the example, let's say we do see what appears to be mold growth. We're going to, in essence, test that to A, determine if it is mold, and B, determine what type of mold that might be. Because as you can imagine, different types of molds may potentially be treated differently. So that's a really important one as well. Another really useful tool would be considered wall cavity sampling. This is a little bit destructive in the fact that we have to put a hole into a wall, for example, but then we're going to actually draw air from within that cavity and have that analyzed for the presence of mold spores to help us determine, again, do we have a hidden mold source within this space? So those are three really common ones right there for sure.
Yeah. Going along with those lines, a lot of, one of the questions we get all the time is, well, Mike, if we see mold, what I know it's mold, or I think it's mold, and why are we taking a sample of it? Well, my answer to that is always the same. Our job as mold assessment consultants is to get you to the proper solution, but we try and get you there the least expensive way possible, right? So it's not just about finding a positive sample. It's not just about testing it to say, yes, this is mold. Sometimes all the time, I tell the other side of the story. Well, here's what it's going to tell us if we do find that this is mold. And here's what it's going to tell us if it's not mold, okay? Yeah. Because it's going to be a much different remediation. You're still going to have to remedy that because it's probably an eyesore or it's been there, whatever. But it's a much different remediation process than if we do identify it as mold. So I always like to tell both sides of that story, because they're like, well, what if it looks like mold, then it probably is. Well, you know what? I've seen it hundreds of times where I've even looked at something, and I've seen a lot. And I look at it and I'm like, that is absolutely mold. And we sample it and it comes back and it's not. And I'm able to save that client money in that area, because we don't have to remove as much material. We can treat that differently, right? And then on the other side, I've seen it the other way too. And I'm like, that is not mold. And then it is, but it's just, nobody's eye can tell you with 100% certainty without some independent third-party lab data that yes, 100% of the time that is mold, or no, it's not, because water in the environment makes a lot of things look very, very similar. And a lot of times maybe somebody's up in the 80%, they can identify it. I've honestly seen some people taste mold like in the field. Like, I'm not kidding you. I've actually seen that.
That is the YouTuber.
I'm not that guy. Okay. I'm not that guy.
Me.
I'm not trying to eat any mold, and I can't smell it. You know what I mean? So, I can smell, but you just can't say with 100% for certainty. And, our job is to get them to the best solution, the cheapest way possible, and save them money on the remediation project. And, giving them both sides of that story is, really beneficial in this case. So didn't mean to jump in there, but
you're good, man.
I felt it was a good spot. Yeah. Thank you.
And absolutely, my favorite calls are when I get to call somebody and say, "Hey, that wasn't mold. We don't have an issue."
No, I agree. Yeah.
Those are the best for sure.
Well, let me jump in for a second too, because I actually just saw some lab results from an assessment I did a couple of days ago, and we haven't even finalized the report yet. But the kitchen cabinet had some discoloration kind of between the base and the back wall, and it looked like mold to me. And but I told the client, I'm like, I'm not 100% sure. It could be a accumulation of dust and dirt just from the years of putting stuff under there. But I'm like, to know for sure, we need to do a sample, and I'm glad we did, because it came back negative.
There you
and
go.
It was probably just dirt. And so
how many times have you guys seen like areas where it's been dirty, and then maybe they clean it, but didn't clean it very good, and then dirt went back over it, and then maybe like some water dripped on it, and honestly, it honestly looks like growth, right? And then we sample it, and you come back, you're like, man, I would have swore that was growth. You just don't know what the history of that little area has happened over the years, right? So always good to get that sample and just verify either way.
Well, no doubt. What was kind of cool in this situation is that my client spent a little bit of money for that analysis, but she saved herself probably $3,000 or $4,000 and
that's it. That's a great point, Craig. That's a great point, because
I tell my clients that, I tell them sometimes you spend a little money to get the information to make an educated decision on whether you need to spend a lot more money.
There you go.
And that's
what's the old saying, right? $1 worth of prevention is worth 1,000 in cure, right? So you know what I mean? Like, and that's what we do, is we get them those answers, and hopefully we can get them some answers that they're looking for. And sometimes we don't. Sometimes we find out, but then you spend the money to get yourself back a healthy environment, right? But we get you there
for sure.
Exactly. Good stuff.
Absolutely.
Great point.
Cool.
Well, Brandon, there's a few other types of testing that we do. You want to just kind of quickly cover
for sure.
The other types?
Definitely. Another one we've been really utilizing, with good success over the past couple of years, is considered dust sampling. And this can be used in a couple different environments. Probably most common when we're talking about the initial investigation is we're checking for, levels of contamination associated with contents. Very often we're doing, vacuum cassettes on couches and clothing and things like that, and or general surfaces throughout the space. These are also really important when we're doing our post-clearance related to our SIRS protocol inspections. So those are really beneficial there as well. Then from there, we start to get into really some of the more advanced stuff. I'll touch on qPCR sampling, commonly referred to as an ERMI sample. And this is, this one, just to give you a heads up on upcoming in the series, we're going to give a whole episode just specific to this sampling, because it deserves a lot of discussion for sure. But it's really looking at the house at a much deeper level. It gives us an overall, you could say, a contamination rating for a space. It also gives an extended history of the house. This is contamination that could have been building up over years and years and years. So really beneficial in our, really detailed investigations for sure. And then
just to jump in there real quick.
Yeah, for sure.
To all of our listeners out there, honestly, get excited about that episode. Honestly, the QPCR, I'm not kidding you when I tell you that I'm so happy that Brandon's here, because Brandon and I talk all the time, and I've learned so much from him on the QPCR side. He's borderline expert. I don't want to call him expert yet. Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. He knows his stuff, and we've learned so much from him on this side. And honestly, that's going to be a really, really good episode, because more and more people in the United States are suffering from these types of conditions, and we're helping to help those clients and the people of America understand what is causing those issues that has never been done in the past, and we're breaking ground here, and I'm super excited to be a part of this with all you guys, and especially you, Brandon, and we do here we do some of that EMA type testing, which kind of tests at the DNA level for mycotoxins, but not exactly what you guys are doing. You guys have developed a really great program, so you guys make sure you come back for that one. It's going to be a really good one. Yeah,
for sure. I'm excited about it, definitely. So really cool stuff. And then I guess touching on the last episode, we're going to get into some of the more specialty sampling. A lot of this isn't specifically mold, but in these investigations, these people can potentially be affected by other things as well. So we'll touch on bacteria sampling. This is really beneficial if, for example, we're dealing in a water loss that was potentially sewage related, and so we're testing for some of that bacteria that's related to that. Also, allergy sampling. We do some samples that really test for some of the most common allergens, such as cat, dog, cockroach, and dust mite. And, I like to throw that one out there because you might be surprised which one of those is the most common allergen that affects people. So we'll definitely touch on that. Also doing a lot of water sampling. These are really good and beneficial to start to determine the quality of your water. There's a lot of ways to look at that, such as it's important to know the presence of heavy metals and turbidity and pH and things like that. So really just trying to provide our clients as much information as possible in regards to their environment, their home, their indoor space. So really, really cool stuff, coming for sure. So
yeah, and you touched on a really good point right there. What you said was, the indoor space, and it just reminded me of some of the conversations that I have with clients or people that I meet, and I'm talking to them about our business, and they, I tell them mold infection sciences, and they're like, oh, you guys just do mold, and then I go kind of down the list of what all we do, and I'm like, we don't just do mold. It's one of our specialties, but if you're having indoor environmental issues, whether it be with, or you don't know what it is, but it could be with your water system or indoor air quality or any of those things, we can figure out a plan to get you back to that healthy living environment. We can test for just about everything, I tell anybody. But it's just, we're not just mold. Mold is, our specialty for sure. We've been doing it, longer, and in my opinion, better than anybody for a long time now. But we do test for a number of other things, and our goal is to always get them back to a healthier living environment, the healthiest living environment that we can get them to, right?
Yeah.
And I tell a lot of people that. So I was glad you said that. It just jogged my memory, and I'm sorry to just keep jumping in here and telling stories, guys. But I know. I get I just get excited. I just can't hold it in. It's got to come out right now. So cool. All right, thanks. Yeah. Craig, take it away.
All right. So, Brad telling the story about the Dr. Phil show and helping the client, it brought up a story that I have, and I'm actually going to tease it a little bit because I think it might be a good talking point for our next series that we do on the air sampling. Prior to coming to work for Mold Inspection Sciences, one of my own consultations, I did some work with some people who were buying a home, and it's just a great example of how we really didn't think there was a problem until we got the results from the lab. And I think it'll be a good story that everybody will enjoy and probably maybe learn a little bit from. So I'm just gonna tease that, and we'll chat next episode on that. So
cool.
And I'll just say one thing right there, on that point, exactly what you just said was you didn't think there was a problem but we knew there was a problem going in, right? So it's about the history of what's happening there also, right? It's not just, did we find wet materials? Did we find stained materials or whatever? But you know the history. So we're thinking this lady has something going on. Something is happening in here. So we're going to continue to inspect. And maybe we wouldn't have recommended a sample there in the past, but we know she's having issues, right? So we recommend the sample, and something's going on behind the scenes that we didn't even see at that point. Eventually, we would have seen it because it'll grow to get to that point. It wasn't there yet, but it was affecting the indoor air quality. And just knowing the history of those projects is super beneficial. And then we just dig a little bit deeper, until we find it. So, and that was a great story. Thanks, Brandon.
Yeah, it sure was. Well, gentlemen, we get a lot of questions. One of the really amazing parts about mold inspection sciences, both Texas and non-Texas, is we have just an amazing staff that is extremely knowledgeable. Our customer service representatives are top notch. We almost always answer the phone if a client calls, and we get a lot of people who just call who just have some general questions, and we like to try to educate. That's a big part of what we do, is educating our clients and helping, and we do
Absolutely.
answer some questions. We really like to get on site and actually do an assessment and then kind of educate the people. So it's really specific to their home and their business and their needs. But some of the questions we get when people call, let's just touch on a few. First one, really common one: how many samples are needed for a typical investigation?
That's a good one. All right. So first, I guess we got to define what's a typical investigation. We have to define that, right? Is there a typical investigation?
I don't know that you could say that there is.
No, I mean, I'm saying it in jest, right? But there's really just I don't feel, if you don't mind, I'll take this one, Brandon. Just to start it.
Jump in, man.
I don't feel there is a typical investigation. Is there an average number of samples that we could average out over the 20 plus years that we've been in business? Yeah, you could say that, but is that going to give you a better idea of what's going to happen the day of your inspection? No. I really don't think it is, because we just, again, we don't know what we don't know until we get there. We do our actual assessment, and our assessment is so thorough. We uncover things quite a few times that other companies don't uncover, and we get to the source of what's happening. I mean, countless times. I mean, you guys have done it. We've done it, where we follow, another assessment company in that couldn't find any issues. Someone just says, I know there's something happening here. Something smells funny, in here, or my daughter is getting sick, or whatever the reason is, right? We followed so many in behind them, and when we get them to the source. And, just jump on our review page. I mean, there's countless stories on there telling that exact story, Had 2 assessment companies come out, couldn't find anything. Mold Inspection Sciences came out, found the source, got us the resolution, and here we are.
Yeah.
Where, we saved this bedroom, or we saved our house, or whatever the story is, right?
Yeah.
And I'm proud to say that, because it's part of the thing I love about this industry is, not just the investigation piece, but getting a client to that solution, right? Like, that is just so rewarding. So how do you say how many samples are needed for a typical investigation? I mean, I honestly think that's an unanswerable question. If you want me to be honest, can I give you an average? Yeah, I could give you the average over the years. Like, but what does that mean to you? You know what I mean? I don't think it really means anything that you're looking for when you ask that question. So
I tell clients,
it's not a better answer.
No, it's very specific to the individual's home. Our sampling strategy is based on that individual's home, and every home is different, for sure. So, the home will dictate how many samples are needed. There's a good way of putting it, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so true.
Yeah.
So another question that comes up frequently is how do our consultants recommend sampling, or where, and what is the process for how we determine that mold sampling strategy?
It's really based on the home itself. Like I said, conditions that would prompt a potential sample recommendation. I tell a lot of people mold is driven by moisture. So where has the moisture been? Is it there now? Is it there previously? But any area that's impacted some degree of moisture is going to warrant, some degree of a sample recommendation, at minimum an air sample. Also, if we have visible growth, we're definitely going to recommend a surface sample of that and an air sample in that space, again, to determine contamination. When you start to get into these deeper investigations with, people on our SIRS protocol and things like that, we're going to start to incorporate the qPCR. But we follow a very strict protocol as far as when those samples are needed. And again, the house will dictate how many samples are needed for us to determine if there's a problem or not. So
yeah,
right.
You touched on a great point there, Brandon, with the surface sample and the air sample, and we get questioned on that a lot because people just don't understand the methodology or whatever. But we've seen it countless times where we see some surface growth or something that looks like surface growth, and we take the surface sample there, and it comes back, it's Penicillium, Aspergillus, or Cladosporium, something like that, and then we take the air sample in the same area, and we get a hit on Chaetomium, right, or we get a hit on Stachybotrys, right, and so now we know that the investigation has to go a little bit deeper because what we tested on the surface wasn't what we got Penicillium aspergillus or clad in the air sample, but we didn't, or in the surface sample, but we didn't get it. We didn't get Chaetomium in the surface sample, and we got them in the air sample, right? Yeah. Both of those hit, and so we're like, okay, so we know we have either a larger issue that's happening behind the scenes or an issue maybe above ceiling or wherever it is, a little bit higher above ceiling, and it's affecting the indoor air quality. So it helps us in that determination. And it's kind of when I talk about this stuff, we talked about hypotheses yesterday, and it's like brings me back to like 8th grade science class, right? And it's like, we come up, we already have like the hypothesis, right? Like we've heard the issues that are going on in the home, and we come up with basically general strategy of what we're going to do. And it's usually the same all the time, especially on a full inspection. But once we get in there, then we come up with that sampling strategy, and then we test, which is our samples, right? And then it gets us to that final conclusion, and it's like, man, I wish I would have paid way more attention in 8th grade. Like I would have, right. But no, it really does. It like brought me back there because like, if you think about it, like that's what we're being taught from a science experimenting standpoint. Yeah. And that's what we're doing. We're testing these homes to find out like what exactly is going on, where it's happening, and then getting that data to back it up to say, yes, we were right in these areas, and then here's the next steps. Here's how we're going to get you there, right? Yep. Sure, and then verifying that at the end, So it's just funny. It just kind of made me think of that, and it's like one of those tangent moments I have, but just like reminds me. Go. And I'm we're all super passionate about this industry, and you just feel it from all of us that we're. The greatest thing that we have is that we have passion for helping people, I think. You know what I mean? Like all of us, and most if you don't, then you're in the wrong industry, right? Because we want to get these people back to a healthy living environment. And, as we do more and more of these, patient type investigations, it gets more and more rewarding as we go on. So
yeah, absolutely.
If y'all can notice, Brandon and Mike and I could probably talk for hours about all this. So
we kind
of
we just tend to ramble on.
I could.
So
I think we probably have. What do we got? I don't want to play host here, but we probably got time for a couple more questions, right? What do we have? What do we have? 11,300 views right now. That's excellent. No, I don't know how many. I can't see it. I'm just kidding. Oh, that's a million. My bad. Got it.
Yeah,
got it.
Million.
Cool. All right, what else we got?
Well, one of the things too that I think Brandon kind of touched on is that every home's different. Every area of a home can be different depending on the moisture source, the problem, moisture related issue. So that's why it's really important to have a really qualified inspector put forth that sampling strategy, and why it's imperative to have all of those samples analyzed that he or she recommends. Because you could have drastically different conditions from one room to the next. What are some of the pitfalls of not collecting those samples? Brandon, what would you say to that?
Not collecting a recommended sample.
Hey, can I just jump in real quick? Let's jump in real quick here. Yeah. Are you saying, Craig, that once you've explained the samples, that there are some clients that don't take all of your samples? Is that what you're really saying right
Not me personally.
Because I won't be able to answer that, as it's never happened to me. So
that never happened
they
to me
just
either.
take them all. No,
Am I the only one?
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I'm that guy.
But yeah, Brandon, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. But
oh, you're good. Well, I was actually about to steal one of your phrases, Mike, to answer that question. You said earlier is we don't know what we don't know. I think that's a good way of putting it. Again, those samples tell us so much more than we can see with our eyes. We're looking at things on a microscopic scale. The more advanced stuff, they're breaking these things down to the DNA level. We kind of, going back to the geeking out thing, we thrive on data. The more data we have, the more we can define our project, whether it's an issue or not, and if so, what extent. The more information I have, the more defined my recommendations can be. And in the end, that client has more information, especially the ones dealing with health issues, things like that. They then have very detailed, exposures that they can present to their doctor. Hey, this is what I'm being exposed to. So it's really just invaluable to have that additional information. So really important part of the investigation. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of times I also, to go back to what I previously mentioned, a lot of times I tell the story of both sides, right? Here, as I'm explaining to them, it's not just about what that story is going to be if it's a positive result. It's also the other side. And I always tie it into, one of the things I do at the very beginning of the inspection is I just either verify or re-verify with the client what their goals of the project are. What are your goals of this project, right? And so once we get to that, we understand what they're looking for, what type of result they're looking for. And then I tie both of those sides of the story into, well, you told me this was the goal of the project, okay? So if we take a sample here and it comes back as positive, this is what that's going to tell us. And if it comes back as negative, this is what that's going to tell us. But both of them are working conjunctively to get them to the ultimate goal of that project, right? And the ultimate goal of the project should normally be, in my opinion, two things: get me back to the healthiest living environment possible, and try not to spend all of my money, right? Basically in a nutshell, right? Just simplifying things, but the cheapest amount of remediation possible, if needed at all, and then get me back to the healthiest living environment on both sides, right? So that should always be our goal. But sometimes, I just have to make sure with the client that that's also their goal.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
for sure.
Agreed.
Good point, Mike.
Well, gentlemen, this has been a very educational discussion, entertaining as well. Thank you both for that. This has been a good time. Just so everybody knows, we are going to definitely dive deep into the sampling processes in our upcoming episodes in this series. We definitely look forward to geeking, as we say, and really kind of digging deep in all that. So,
and Brandon's going to be on them. Brandon's going to be on all of them. We're so excited. I'm
invited back.
Yes.
Did I make the cut?
You made the cut.
Well,
is it still?
Yeah, we're kind of on the fan.
I'm super excited.
Still.
Yeah.
No,
awesome.
Brandon, you are definitely coming back for sure.
All right. Cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a good time. One of the things too, if some of your listeners out there, you really have some questions about the sampling, if you want to see a sample report that we provide, sample lab report, or our final mold inspection report, you can download a copy of that from our website. You can always call our office. Again, our customer service representatives are amazing. They're happy to help, and they'd be happy to email you samples of our reports. And I think you'll get a lot out of that and kind of understand a little bit more. So I encourage you to do that and just educate yourself. And we're here to help in that process as well. So Mike, Brandon, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a pleasure, and we look forward to the upcoming series.
Craig, always a pleasure to be here with you, and looking forward to it. Glad Brandon's a part of this. This is a super good dynamic, and looking forward to the next one. So we'll see you all then.
Yep, looking forward to it, gentlemen. Appreciate it for sure.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a great day.
All right, thanks. You too.
Thank you for joining me today for this episode of the Secret Life of Mold podcast. If you need help with mold issues in your home or office, we'd love to help. For our Texas location, please call 888-335-MOLD. That's 888-335-6653. Or email contact@moldtx.com. For our locations other than Texas, reach out to our customer care team at 800-619-MOLD. That's 800-619-6653. Or email us at contact@moldsci.com.